I don't want to just like eliminate all conservatives from the political equation. Now, I will tell you, I would love to politically neutralize the Republican Party. If I could take every Republican out of elected office, like if they were no longer holding elected office, I think the country would be in a better place.
So you want to go
Because
to
I
a
think the
one-party state?
if the alternative is the GOP as it currently stands, sure. Because
Well,
a
two parties.
one-party
We can have
state.
a left-wing party and then a further left-wing party.
Because within the
So that's a
because within the
one-party
Democratic-
state. I think there is a giant miscommunication that goes on between progressives and conservatives. I view conservatives as kind of the defense of society, and I view progressives as kind of the offense. And we need to have this like yin and yang political process to kind of develop new policies. We can't stagnate, and we can't change things willy-nilly without risking society. So I do think the two work together, or should work together.
I think that sounds great on paper or in like an Aaron Sorkin TV show like The West Wing, but in terms of contemporary politics, I don't think it maps on well, because I would say collectively the GOP in terms of its leadership,
You don't see any value in conservatives, though. Like you see zero value in conservatives. It's obvious in every. Well, it's obvious in everything that you have said.
Do you?
Okay, tell us the value in conservatives.
And conservative.
Well, I think conservatism is relative, right? So compared to other progressives,
Look,
like
he's already.
Aaron,
look, he's
when
already.
Aaron popped
I'll
in.
answer it. I don't.
No.
I don't find value in any conservative
Look,
values.
at least she
really
says
depends.
it right there. Are conservatives all racist? All greedy racists? Tell us.
See,
I
that's what I'm
didn't say
saying.
that they were greedy racists. I said I
why
don't agree with conservative ideas.
Well, no, he asked. He wasn't accusing. He was asking if you.
Yeah, I'm asking you. Are you using the stereotype? Are all conservatives greedy racists?
Nope.
Okay, good.
Okay. But there's no value to them.
What do you what do you mean by conservative? Are you talking Republican
You
in its
tell
current
us.
iteration?
We're asking you.
Do I think that, okay, I would say that, for example, like economics, I would say that capitalism or defensive capitalism is broadly associated with conservatism. I consider myself a soc dem, so I don't want a socialist economy. So yes, I would say that conservatives in theory bring something to the table in at least some sort of defense of capitalism. But so I don't want to take conservatives out of the equation altogether. I'm talking about the GOP as it currently stands, their political proxies in the political process here in the United States.
Well, I don't think the GOP and conservatives are like a one-for-one thing.
I agree. 100%.
I'm talking philosophically about conservatives and philosophically about progressives.
Well, you said a tweet that started all of this panel said conservative voters specifically, so I assumed you were talking about GOP voters.
Well,
right? Or no?
The tweet we were, or he was, I assume. But for the question, he was not. He was asking broadly, philosophically, do you think conservatism has a place?
And also, I know you might not like that answer, but it's, again, there is a relativity associated with, we were talking about labels in this respect earlier. There are some positions on which I would be considered conservative relative to other progressives. So no, again, I don't want to just like eliminate all conservatives from the political equation. Now, I will tell you, I would love to politically neutralize the Republican Party. If I could take every Republican out of elected office, like if they were no longer holding elected office, I think the country would be in a better place.
So you want to go to a one-party state?
If the alternative is the GOP as it currently stands, sure. Because
a one-party,
we can have a left-wing party and then a further left-wing party.
Because within the
so that's a one-party state.
Wait a minute, because within the Democratic Party, you have a wide range of ideology. You have Joe Manchin, Kyrsten Sinema on one side, and then you have AOC and Bernie Sanders on the other. There's a range of ideology there.
If you had a football team that had had a offense and a further offense, do you think that would be a good football team?
I've got a better one. Listen, I don't watch football. I don't pay attention to it. How about a three-legged race? I'd rather have a partner in a three-legged race that doesn't just fall to the ground and hug my leg and keep me from crossing the finish line.
I think.
Wait. You brought up Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, and I don't think that makes sense, because if there were no Republicans, then Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema would have no power. They only have power as being a split vote.
Well, no.
Under your way, that the far left would just gain more and more and more power if there's no balance to it.
Well, no, because conservative voters would exist. They would just. What I'm saying is that they would not be the hinge point on which legislation lives and dies. Of course not. I don't want them to be. I think that if you have conservative Democrats in the party, I'm sure that they bring some value to the equation. I don't know what specific policy I would support, but they would still have a place there. They just wouldn't be the threshold. Right now, Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema are the altar on which progressive legislation lives or dies, and it usually dies.
Okay, well, if you could Dano snap your finger and make every Republican politician, every Republican voter, change to become a Democrat and a Democrat voter, do you think that would have a better outcome overall?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
By orders of magnitude. If you look at where the average Republican is at this point, they're not like your bog standard conservative or like neocon of like the Bush era. They have moved further right significantly when it comes to immigration, when it comes to like vaccines, and like COVID are perfect examples of this, in my opinion, where they are just way to the right of the like average American, an average voter.
I feel like
so-
most Democrats would have said that they, in favor of the Thanos snap hypothesis or hypothetical, they would have agreed with that during Bush. I mean, Bush was called like a war criminal and Hitler and all these things too. So I don't know if that would have made a difference.
That's entirely possible. Do you not, I guess, with the benefit of hindsight, do you think that it could have been an overreaction during the Bush era and justified in the Trump
Of course,
era?
everything's relative, yeah.
Right, exactly. So here's my thing. If we're going to talk about the merits of the GOP as a party, what are they? Because I just see negative virtually all the way around that, and what positives they do bring to the table as a political party could be replicated by a bigger Democratic Party. What does the GOP bring to the table?
Well, this is why when Adam originally asked the question, he meant conservatism as a philosophy, because I do think that conservatism as a philosophy is vitally important to America, because I think part of the problem is that people assume that their personal philosophy and their government philosophy are going to be the same thing. When we know this, and this is another example of left kind of science and nihilism, it's known, it's just something that's psychologically studied and known, that if you have the individual motivation and individual worldview of the kind of pull yourself up by your bootstraps mentality, that will provide you with better life outcomes. And yet, that is like not something that we want to be taught anymore to people, that you shouldn't have that attitude. And that is not wanting to be taught, because the perception is, well, if you teach that on an individual level, people are going to then put that on a federal government level, and they're doing that because they want to cut funding, because they don't want to pay taxes, because blah, blah, blah. They don't want to help minorities, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, and that's why I think that, again, in terms of why I would be fine just politically neutralizing the Republican Party, but I'm not really interested in alienating conservatives as a whole. I do think they have a place, and again, conservatism is relative. I think it's entirely possible to justify a conservative philosophy on an individual basis, like you said, the pull yourself up by your bootstraps mentality. That's a terrible piece of legislation. Like, that's a terrible basis for legislation. You need a robust, social safety net and welfare state. But I think it's probably a great ethic to try to instill in somebody on an individual basis that you should try to master your environment, and perhaps not just assume that you will have some sort of support, even if that support should exist by your society or your government. But for me, and I think this is also one of the things where you and I disagree on, or the three of us disagree on, Adam and Sitch, is I'm more interested in the political proxy of conservatism in the United States, the Republican Party, because they're the ones who actually wield power. And I also think that it's a feedback loop. I don't think that Republican politicians are just being radicalized by a base. I think they also radicalize their base, and it just feeds back and forth. And I hear you talk a lot about conservative culture and culture in general. I'd like to know where you stand on Republican politicians, Republican leaders, people who actually wield power, and not just people on Twitter or whatever. So could you expound what your thoughts are on the GOP?
Well, so to be clear, we primarily, I would say, talk about cultural issues on our show overall. I mean, we don't even spend that much time talking about Democrat politicians individually, of those things. But in terms of specific Republican politicians, I'm from Florida, and I remember at first, I remember at first.
Yeah, Stephen's there. That's exact. It's not even DeSantis. It's the fact that Stephen's there too. I'm
there.
really
You go.
sorry.
I'm in the vicinity. But no, because at first I was like, I was happy with DeSantis doing like a lot of the anti-woke stuff, the anti-CRT stuff, and things of that nature. But then when he went after Disney, I was like, To me, this is a pretty egregious use of anti-free speech for Disney, just because they said that they don't want to support and they want to repeal the parental rights education bill, that he would then try to leverage his political power against him. So I kind of lost a lot of respect for DeSantis at that moment.
So getting back to Stephen's, Stephen earlier used the F word, the fascist word. Do you think that the GOP has a fascistic strain to it?
I think everyone has an authoritarian strain.
Do you think
And I think that's going to manifest through, if you mean fascism, like actually the definition of fascism, then obviously that will manifest in the right through fascism, and on the left it'll manifest through usually some kind of authoritarian communism.
Okay, well
So,
then
yes, really quick. That is a yes. You think that there are
Well,
fascist elements of the GOP, but you're just
think
also
there are-
saying the
I
GOP
think-
too and the Democrats.
I think there are authoritarian elements in all people and all parties that will always trying to manifest themselves, and that we have to fight back against them.
do you think
Okay,
it's
who
present?
does it worse though? Do you
Yes.
think the Democrats do it worse, or do you think the Republicans do it worse?
Right now,
Right now.
I think there's a strong argument you could say that because of all the Trump stuff, that stuff is more at least showing up in government itself. Where I think in the left it's more showing up in culture, and an institutional bias.
Okay, so wouldn't
Non-governmental
I
institutional
think
bias.
I agree with you. So I would argue, I would argue that is a more like serious and egregious concern. That like you have a party that is trying to ensconce fascistic policies into law versus social disagreements with
What is
like
the fascistic policy that they're implementing?
oh my God, where do I even fucking start with the GOP?
Well, no, because I think
mean,
we're
like,
talking about very different things.
the border wall.
How-
In my opinion,
To
like
a
Trump's
dog
like
pile?
Trump's
Border
I
wall
don't
is
wanna turn this
fascism.
into a dog pile, but I also have a lawyer that would like to join. You let
Pisco?
me know if
No,
you're-
tell him to go away.
Okay. Sorry.
No,
No.
I'm just
Go
I'm
piss
I'm only
somewhere.
I'm only kidding. Look, Pisco is
Can you help
welcome.
him? Are
Yeah,
we okay
sure.
with that?
Look, yeah, Pisco's
Yeah,
welcome.
Pisco can go on. Wait, why do you think the border wall is an example of fascism?
Well, I think Trump like mobilized his base and encouraged people to vote for him using explicitly fascistic rhetoric, kind of this whole us versus them. We need to keep Mexicans out of this country. They're bringing over drugs. They're bringing over rapists. The Muslim ban, like a lot of it was the stoking of like xenophobia, and we know that rhetoric is really what drives voters to make their decisions on the candidates that they support. It's not really going to be policy. But Trump was able to kind of like play a two-pronged attack. Like the only policy that Trump really had and like staked his claim on in 2016 was stoking racism, xenophobia to get people to vote for him for this border wall.
I would
And then at
also
that point, like I live in South Texas, and there are people here, people who voted for Trump, who are now suing the Trump administration because their homes were like their property is trying
their
to be
land was
eminent
repossessed,
domain,
right.
eminent domain or whatever to build a border wall.
Yeah, so I think so the way that I think conceptualize the right is that the right or that conservatives generally view things as the threat to society is coming from an external source coming in to infiltrate the society and then degenerate it from within. That's kind of how like the right-wing moral framework works. And the left has the opposite framework, where they believe that all of the problems from society come from pre-existing systems and traditions, and so that there's all this like malevolence already built into wherever they are, so they have to go outside to find new ideas, or they have to expel sort of like the corruption from within. And so it's interesting because when you say like, oh, Trump was pushing this very us versus them mentality, I don't disagree with that. But you don't notice it because it's invisible to you that was also the us versus them is just the narrative that the left is pushing. It's just not doing it from a country standpoint. It's saying, oh, these racists or these Republicans, they're the them, and you're the us.
What about like Trump's aspirations in 2024 to like strip checks and balances, for example? So he wants to.
No, but I'm just curious if Straighter Aid sees what I'm saying before we move on.
Sure.
I mean, I don't think it's authoritarianism or fascistic of like Democrats or liberal pundits to be criticizing the other party in this country and like conservative voters in the same way, like because they're basing that off of like not something that's not an immutable characteristic. It's not an immutable characteristic to be a conservative. Those are policy choices and people making up their minds to support certain candidates and make certain decisions and their actions, which all have consequences, as opposed to what you're talking about, which is people criticizing like cultural preferences and aesthetics. I find these to be very different and one to be a lot more serious than the other because the president of the United States is trying to stoke animosity on things that people like on a basis that people can't change, as opposed to ideas.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I obviously stoking fear and hatred against people for their immutable characteristics, I agree, is really bad. At the end of the day, if it's a political party or an ideology versus mutable characteristics, I don't think it matters. It's not like those people are going to change their political affiliation, on a dime. It's not really what we see in the way it manifests.
I'm curious about that. How do you mean?
Well, no, because so I'm sure you've seen that really stupid centrist meme where it's like you have the KKK on one side and you have the civil rights on the other side, and you have the person saying compromise.
Yeah, Adam retweeted that the other day and said it was based, if I remember correctly.
No, he tweeted my version and said it was based. Which
gotcha.
is where on one side you have the people.
Look at this guy. He's gunning for me, Sitch. What the hell?
The other side is the people that have the little Antifa hoods on them, and they're saying we want to destroy liberalism, or it says we want to destroy liberalism and capitalism. And people's response to this, I thought, were really stupid, which is saying, how can you compare those two things? They want to kill people that are black, and they want to kill people based on an idea, or they want to kill an ideology. And it's how many wars in human history are fought over ideology? Okay, World War II was fought over ideology. The idea that you're going to separate ideology from being a less of an egregious thing to go after people over than the race, I just completely disagree with.
Okay, let's chill. Okay, World War II, Japan, Germany, it was not just an ideology. There was a lot of racial shit and racial superiority baked into this as well, okay?
Well, no, that's true, but obviously the ideology was fascism versus non-fascism, right?
Ethnocentrism is an ideology too.
No. Well, yeah, I mean that was an ideology, but a lot of it was also built on literal racial superiority, right?
That is an ideology.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
So maybe I should, instead of using World War II, I should use all the conflict that was going on in the Cold War, which was definitely based around socialism versus liberalism.
Yeah, I don't think it's fascist of the left to criticize an ideology that baked within it is racist or anti-Semitic ideas.
But the other thing.
Wait. Do you think liberalism has baked within it racism and anti-Semitism?
No, but I'm talking about if we're Stephen just brought up how World War II had a lot of racial animosity undergirding it, and so if you're saying that
well, I acknowledge that was a bad example, and then we moved to the Cold War to talk about how the dangers of just saying that you can attack people for their ideology.
I know, but some ideologies are worth attacking.
That may be.
I agree.
That could definitely be. I don't disagree with that.
Hi, you just listened to a clip from the Sitch and Adams show. If you like what you heard, you can listen to our live show right here on this channel on Sunday, starting at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. And if you want, you can super chat us. We read $20 and up super chats on the show and then do a follow-up stream on the following Tuesday where we read the rest of the unread super chats and interact with fans of the show. Subscribe to this channel right here to listen to the live show or to listen to more of our awesome clips.